Welcome to the first Safety and Risk Success podcast episode of 2024 with me, Christian Harris. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be sharing some episodes with you to lay the groundwork for thinking ahead about what we can do this year to make the world a safer place. And so I thought I'd start with this recording of a Safety Roundtable which we held late last year, and it's all about how to evaluate success as a safety professional. I will share some thoughts, some principles, some ways of looking at this decision. And then, as always, we open it up to discussion from the wider group and have some really engaging conversations around the topic. Trust you'll find it useful and you'll enjoy it. See you on the other side. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Thanks for joining this Safety Roundtable session. Today we're going to be talking about how we can evaluate success as a safety professional. So what does success mean, and how do we know if we're on track? And I'll explain to you why I chose this as a topic in a minute. But firstly, if you've not been to one of these sessions before, it's called a Safety Roundtable. That's because it is an open discussion that we will have together. They happen every 2 weeks, so there's one more now between now and Christmas, and then we'll have a little hiatus over the festive period. Each time we cover a slightly different topic. Either, like today, it's me introducing a topic and then opening it up to us, chatting it through, or sometimes I have a guest with me and they and I will discuss the topic a bit, and then we'll open it up to discussion. They're always good fun. I hope that you always learn something and get some value from it. So do feel free to invite colleagues and your fellow safety pros along to future versions of this. And I wanted to give a quick update as well into something that we've developed and launched just this week, which is called a Safety Champion Quiz. So what we've done is we've pulled together some questions that will help you to figure out what kind of safety champion you are. You can find it at safetychampion.scoreapp.com. It takes 3 or 4 minutes to answer the questions, and then at the end of that, it's going to tell you if you are a strategic visionary when it comes to managing safety, an innovative problem solver, a practical achiever, or an empathetic leader. So I'd encourage you to give that a go. And sorry, somebody just drawing on the screen. Give that a go and let me know your feedback. Be really interested to get your feedback on that. Just something brand new we've launched this week. So let's think about, how do we evaluate success in safety? How do we know if we're on track or not? And this obviously is something of a Shakespearean challenge. For those of you who are able to see, you can see on the screen, to measure or not to measure. That is the question. And it's something that we all kind of know that we need to measure success in some way, shape or form, but exactly how do we do that and how do we know we're on track is perhaps not quite as easy as it might seem to be. Remember, I'm going to be inviting you guys to join in this conversation. So give us your thoughts, give us your comments, think about questions as we go. So traditionally, how do we measure success in safety? We look at, in my experience, 2 things. We look at incident rates and we undertake compliance checks. Those are the 2 kind of traditional metrics that people have been using for a long time. And we're going to discuss other things we can add into that or replace these with as we get into this discussion. But this is kind of a benchmark and a baseline for where most organizations have historically been. So a few things that spring to mind when I consider these two types of metrics. Do they really tell the whole story? Not story. Nice typo on the screen there. Can we fudge the data? So I know people who run businesses that help with audits, compliance checks, and they know full well that if a site knows when this third-party compliance check is going to happen, the data is going to be in a pretty good position when they turn up. If they turn up at a different time, unannounced, unexpected, the data is going to be in a slightly different position, shall we say. So how reliable is this data that we're getting from looking at compliance checks and even from incidents as well? Also, are these metrics giving us as broad a perspective as we need to think about, are we on track? Can we control incidents is another question to think about. So if you work in sales, obviously you want to sell because that's how you earn your livelihood and ultimately keep your job. But you can't actually control whether or not somebody buys. You can influence whether somebody buys, just like you can influence whether an incident happens or not, but you don't have 100% control over it. If we think about sales, there are certain things that we can control, and these are the inputs that we can put in. So how many times we pick up the phone is an input that is fully within our control. We can pick up the phone and dial 100 people, or we can pick up the phone and dial 3 people, but that's within our control. So should we not be focusing maybe more on some inputs rather than the outputs of how many incidents, how many compliance checks? So something for us to get into as we go into this discussion. The reason that I thought this topic would be particularly interesting was one of the frequent attendees to the roundtable and I had a catch up. And by the way, if you do come along to these events and you want to have a one-to-one, feel free to drop me a line. I'm always happy to have a chat. And he said, a topic that would be helpful to him would be how to know if he's doing the right things in his business to ensure safety. Because he works in an SME. And so he doesn't really have many incidents because there aren't that many people working in the business and the activities that they undertake are not hugely high risk. So looking at incident data only, you'd think, well, this is a well-run, safe business. But is that enough? And it got me thinking of the analogy of my specialist field of slip prevention. I bang on a lot about the data and the statistics, and in the UK, over 300,000 people a year go to A&E after slipping and falling. So that is a big number. That's a large number of people that are affected by these types of incidents. And obviously, that is only the people that go to A&E. There are people that suffer from a slip and a hurt, and perhaps go to the doctor or a physio or whatever it might be, rather than going to A&E. But if you look at it from a macro perspective, yes, we've got a big problem. What about from a micro perspective? Let's think about the number of buildings in the UK. There are many more than 300,000 buildings in the UK where somebody might slip. So if you divided that 300,000 kind of serious slips by the number of buildings, that means the average building has many, many fewer or less than one slip per year. So looking just at the incident data, if we didn't understand this maths, we might say, well, and I've heard this a lot, oh, we've only had a couple of slips, nothing to worry about. Actually, if you look at the curve, with 2 slips here, you're well above average. So that to me would be raving a red flag. Equally, there'll be a lot of buildings that don't have any data to go from an incident perspective. But is that normal? Is that good? Does that mean they're really good at managing slips, or does that just mean they've been a bit lucky? And so it's quite difficult at an SME level or say a site level to think about, how do we get this pulse check? How do we know if what we're doing is actually working, or if we're just being perhaps a bit fortunate that things aren't happening? So that was the context really that I wanted to open up for discussion. And then a few ideas just to introduce to the pot. And then I'm going to open it up and we can chat this through. And I'd be really interested to know what you're doing to feel as if you are on track or off track regarding safety, and perhaps some of the things you've tried that haven't worked for you, etc. So just a few things ideas to throw out there. Safety pulse checks, safety culture. We've discussed before, is safety culture a real thing? But I've also interviewed somebody from Safe 365, and they would say you can measure safety culture. Is that a good barometer for are we on track? Can we be measuring more inputs? How could we leverage technology? And I'd be interested to get your experiences and insights on that. Here's an idea. Could we role play a prosecution? So let's think about something bad that could happen in the business, even if it hasn't happened yet, and run through, perhaps with the help of our solicitors and the help of our insurers, a bit of a prosecution case study, and kind of role play that through. Are we in as good a position as we could be? Or if something bad were to happen, are we perhaps more exposed than we would want to be? Could we be better at tracking near-miss data? Is near-miss data a better barometer than incident data, for example? Obviously, there are pros and cons. There are challenges with tracking near misses. What about this? What about working against benchmarks? So if we look at the HC data, we can see by sector incident rates. We can see by through insurance claims data. We can see, for example, the government portal. What proportion of insurance claims in a given sector come from various causes. So why don't we think about benchmarking against that and focusing on the areas that the data for our industry or our sector tells us are important if we're not seeing incidents ourselves? How about going down and doing some more in-depth root cause analysis? Let's go down into the weeds of some of these issues and try to see what we can do there. Think about networking within our industry, going on panels, sharing data among companies that are similar to ourselves, and seeing where other people may be struggling, and then let's put some more stock into that. And I guess also it's kind of this feeling of safety as well. So if we stood in front of a mirror and we honestly answered with our hand on our hearts, do we think we're doing everything we possibly could? Do we feel safe? Does it feel right to us? That could be another way of just getting that kind of barometer of are we on track or are we off track? So there's a few ideas from me. What I'd love to do is now open that up to thoughts from you guys. I will monitor the chats as best I can. But if you're on the Zoom, then feel free to go to reactions, raise your hand, and come and have a chat, and let's open up this discussion and see where we get to. What would be great as a starting point would be, which of these metrics are you currently using in your business and why? So I don't know if anybody would be willing to kind of come on and save me having to pick on somebody, of course, to volunteer and just say, look, these are the metrics that we're using now. This is why we're using them. This is how long we've been using them, and this is why we think they're the right kinds of metrics to use. If nobody volunteers, I'm going to have to pick on somebody. I don't want to do that. So come on. let's why don't we see if somebody's gonna raise their hand and volunteer?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, good on you.
Somebody's got to leap in. And this is the first time I've been on one of these with you.
Oh, great. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. I'm health and safety manager for one of the larger security companies in the country. 18,500 headcount, thereabouts, working on many client sites. And one metric that I've got over 20 years of continuous data is reportable injury frequency rate.
Yeah.
I know it's the top end of stuff going wrong, but it started at 0.4 something and it's 0.1 something now. And it's bobbling around. Sometimes it's a bit lower, sometimes it comes up. So patently, there has been a significant improvement in outcomes over that period of time. We can then look at in more detail lost time rates, slips, trips and falls, which is our largest single cause of injury or serious injury, as well as violence and various other causations. But we're now looking much more at incidence rates against particular clients, sites. Is there anything that is disproportionately way above anybody else? And we're starting to look at that and then getting into more depth around what controls has the client got in place, because I can't control that environment. That's theirs. I can't check. I can inquire as to what cleaning methodologies they use on the floor. Is it leaving it with a greasy surface, or is it we just do an awful lot more walking on those sites, and therefore if you walk a lot you might fall over a lot more. So there are a range of factors in terms of outcomes, but then you've got the inputs, training, what levels of participation in our frontline communications, which may be improving the level of just general H&S understanding amongst our frontline staff, or just an increasing level of safety awareness. It doesn't need to be necessarily absolutely relevant to their role, but if we keep on dropping bits in about, hey, how about thinking about this? Are you doing that? Has this occurred on your site? And it just gets them thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should consider where I'm about to put my foot, or let's put the phone away while I'm getting from A to B. Maybe I won't get to B if I keep looking at my phone rather than concentrating where I'm putting my feet. Like there's curbs and cars. And if you're in the east of England or northern Scotland from this evening onwards, ice, snow and all sorts of other horrible things. Poof, your feet are out, landing heavily on your coccyx. And we've an older work. We have representatives from the upper end of the age scale.
Yes.
And if you fall over and you're in your 60s, you're probably going to break something. 20s, you just dust yourself down, a bit embarrassed. I might tell somebody about it. 30s, it's going to hurt. You might sprain something. 40s, it's definitely going to hurt. But by the time you get to 55, 60 and upwards, you fall over, more than likely you're going to fracture something. Be it scaphoid, humerus or other bits and pieces, it's going to be uncomfortable. So it's a mix of different indices. Benchmarking in our industry isn't necessarily that easy. Businesses have very much particular sectors they're operating in, and that can radically skew outcomes. I think I've said enough. Let's listen.
No, it's good. And I think you've got the advantage, I suppose, of that scale in that main approach that you're talking about.
When you've 18,500 people, I was comparing our reduction in serious injury rates against the HSE's recently published data,
Yeah.
you can almost overlay one over their chart, their graph over ours, and it almost follows.
Yeah.
Which, yes, it's good, but how much of what we've done has influenced that, theirs, or are we just along with everybody else? Don't know.
Yeah. And that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because and that kind of comes back to why I thought this was a really interesting topic when it was raised to me. Is, well, whether we're doing well or whether we're doing not so well, how do we actually know what we're doing is impacting that, or is it just that
Societal
that's
change,
the way
yes.
things are going on? And so that's where I think sometimes trying to think about slightly different ways of being able to answer that question could well be interesting. And it sounds like that's what you would go and do then on a specific site level or a business unit level or whatever it might be once you've got this kind of overall data, which is
it's trying to find as many different things you can measure, because if you don't record it, you can't measure it. So let's try and record as much as we can and then dive into it and see what you can tease out. Yes.
Yeah. Good stuff. Thanks, Bob. Really appreciate that, and welcome to the Safety Roundtable. Hopefully, we'll see you again. Naomi, how are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you. How's yourself?
Yeah, good. Loving the dedication, because it's, what is it? What time is it for you?
It's 8:52 p.m. So I'm actually really excited that it happens at this time of night. My son's in bed. I can have the house to myself, and it's all good to come on board and have a quick chat around the round table.
That works all right then. To be fair, it's not too late, is it? Yeah, I
No,
was thinking,
not at all.
is it like 11 p.m. or something, and that would be real dedication.
No, that I would be in bed. I wouldn't be able to be that dedicated, unfortunately. I do like my sleep.
Good stuff.
Um, I currently work for an amazing company who has an incredible safety culture. And I say that in terms of it's driven from the bottom up. So the people at the bottom, the new tradesmen, the new people on the floor, they're actually concerned with their own safety. And to help with that, the supervisors actually, they don't push it as in force down their throats. They ask those questions and make them think a little bit differently about how they're going to approach work. So in Australia, we're governed by so much legislation and law and guidance material that's handed to us by the government on how we need to do things, and how we have to do things. So we actually have to be incredibly careful on how we approach it, because obviously your first port of call isn't the legislation says this, therefore you have to do it, because that's just going to get people's backs up straight away. So I find the best way to actually measure the success of the safety is actually be on the ground and have those conversations.
Yeah.
So basically going out for those site visits, and don't get me wrong, I love data. I love how it's black and white. It's there in front of you. There's no arguing with it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's so much value in just being there with your people, having those relationships established to be able to actually make a difference and get the true story behind your data, because sometimes your data is very reliant on people actually reporting that something has happened or an incident has occurred. So to become less reliant on that, it's so much value in just having those conversations and being on the ground and with your people.
Yeah, I love that, and you're getting some good support in the chat as well. Do you try to have kind of like a qualitative set of questions or barometers that you then kind of do a pulse check on every so often, so rather than just having that kind of free-flowing conversation, are there certain key questions that you might ask and start to track those a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. So we still come and have a review and improve meeting. So we review what we've done and see if we can do it better. So even if we are doing an amazing job, and we are doing things right, is there another approach? Can we do it better? And that's recorded in formal meeting minutes with formal actions to go, yeah, okay, we can do it this way, or we can do it that way, or we're going to try this, or we're going to try that, or we're not feeling really good in the safety space at the moment. But I think in terms of creating that to start with, it's those relationships, because no one's going to speak up at those meetings or actually give you the information you need if you haven't created the safe space to make them feel that they can speak up in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was a bit worried a few minutes ago that people didn't feel safe to speak up on here, but thankfully Bob got everyone off to a good start. How big's your organisation?
So I currently work for a branch of an organisation. So our particular branch only has 88 people,
Okay.
but our broader or parent organisation and the amount of companies we have underneath is a lot bigger.
Yeah. And just out of interest, then, is the approach that you're taking and that you've just explained, which I think is great, is that something that's done, by an equivalent person to you in the different branches or the different business units? And so, in other words, it's something that is done at scale, because
Yeah,
obviously it's
yeah.
one of the challenges of that human interaction is it's hard to potentially scale that without obviously a lot of people getting involved in it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, the organization is huge. I actually don't know the full numbers, so sorry I can't give you those.
Oh, that's all right.
But yes, yeah, so being a safety advisor for my particular branch, I'm only a small, tiny little ant compared to how many of us there are there throughout the organization.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are very, very reliant on people, the safety professionals who know what you're doing. You actually do know the legislation, you are involved in it, you are very reliant on us going in there and having those conversations. And yeah, we are speckled and throughout the business. So it's not just review and improve, it's what we call a toolbox talk, where all the guys are in, or all the guys and girls are in, and we're all having the conversations together, kind of thing. But yeah, it's about having people together, bringing people together, not just having that once a year we're going to survey this many people kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, good stuff. Well, thanks for that. That's really useful and valuable to share. So really appreciate it, and um, I think you deserve to have a glass of wine whilst you're watching this, since it's 9 o'clock at night. Viren, do you want to come on board and unmute yourself and say hello? And then something that I'd love everyone to think about would be methods that they've tried, whether it be in your current organization or previously, that perhaps haven't worked as well as you thought they might have done, and maybe we could explore some of the reasons why that could be. And if anybody is on from a small business that is in that position that I kind of mentioned, where they feel they're on track, but it's hard because they're not really having any incidents or anything like that, it'd be interesting to get your perspective as well.
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry it took me a minute, to get the video on and all that. Someone came at my door, so I had to open.
No problem.
Anyway, thanks for creating the Zoom meeting. I believe it's my second or third session with you. I forget when the previous sessions were, but it's always been in the middle of a meeting. I am logging in from New Delhi, India. Not like that would matter, but just just for the time sense, it's 6:30 p.m. right now.
Right.
What's the time for you over there?
It is 1 p.m. in the UK right now.
All right. So yeah, just real quick. This is not regarding my current job. It's my job with Master Brand Cabinets, which is a high-end kitchen cabinets making company. They make high-end kitchen cabinets, and this was way back in 2016, 2017. I worked there for 14 months in Goshen, Indiana, which is 2 hours away from Chicago.
Okay.
Anyone is here in the US might have a little perspective, So actually, while I was there, we had quite a bit of focus with regards to safety. And what I mean by that is, first of all, it was I used to work second shift. My department used to work second shift, and the timings were 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And I would just always have to work overtime, because so mine was sort of like the last department where I would get the finished products, and I was a team leader and I was supposed to make sure that everything is perfect. So then we load about 10,000 odd doors in the truck, and then it leaves every night from Goshen to Jasper, as and when we are done. So it's kind of I mean, I know I'm deviating here a little bit. I just want to create the suspense,
Yeah.
for you guys.
But tell the story. Stories always work.
Yeah, but the reason why my second shift, would be like not 8 hours, but 9.5, 10.5 hours, because, the people in front of us, the department were just really slow, and, it just keeps getting lagged on. So that's why I would have to work more than 8 hours every day. But, it was a per hour job. I was on a 1-year work visa. So, the hourly job was the closest I could get, to having a job before I moved back to India, where I am right now for the past 6 years. So yeah, that was the reason. But anyway, yeah, getting back to the safety issue, it was not much of an issue, but we did have, like as I said, a good amount of focus with regards to safety. Just that I was a team leader, and on the board we had the whole month laid out, right from day 1 to day 30. So basically, like how a calendar looks like, except we had a green marker and a red marker and a black marker to identify when we had a slip or a fall or a cut. So we had various degrees of injuries with regards to the smallest and non-threatening injury would be like just someone would just not be wearing gloves when he or she got a cut, just because she or she came back from a bathroom break, from a lunch break, from a dinner break, and oh, I'm almost done in 10 minutes, why bother wearing my gloves? So we had to wear our goggles and gloves throughout our 8-hour shift. And there are all sorts of people everywhere, some who love to follow instructions. I was one of them who used to follow every little instruction, right from the safety to just the job aspect. And then someone would get a cut, someone would just slip and fall, someone would while doing the sanding and dusting process, not wearing the safety glasses. Like I would wear safety glasses on top of my glasses, which I already wear. It looks weird, but hey man, who cares, as long as I'm being safe, so the dust would someone's eyes. So yeah, long story short, we had days where we didn't have any safety issues with regards to no cuts, no bites. Sometimes the stapler pin would get jammed into your thumb, so that still a small injury counts as a we then during our afternoon meeting we would always discuss the previous day, if we had any slips, injuries, threats, whatever. Broadly, let's call it safety. So we will be like, yeah, yesterday we didn't have anything. 2 days ago we did not have anything, and then one particular day we would be like, yeah, last 7 days we did not have any injuries at all. So we used to have a consecutive streak kind of going on, which at the time I was there, I was only there for 13-14 months, and the longest streak we had was like 20 days. 20 days didn't have any injuries, any cuts, falls, whatever. It still all counts into that. But yeah, if I think I'm trying to share my screen here, just because I have a news article which I randomly pulled up, and it shows as Master Brand, it's one of the safest places to work in. They have a good safety record. This is as of August 2023, so like 3-4 months back. I'm trying to click share screen. It says host has disabled.
Yeah, it might not work at the minute, so don't worry about that bit. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, I'm always more than happy to share the link across chat. But
stick it in the chat, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I can do that. Some people might be occupied, so not everyone might be able to look at the chat if it is anything of the interest. Yeah, but that's all I have for now. I mean, that's what I'm doing.
Great. Well, thank you for joining. Really appreciate it, and yeah, great to see that we're getting a nice international audience, which is it's quite crazy if you think about it. I'm sat here in Southeast London and talking to people across the world. about safety, which is pretty cool. And it's great to see everyone's passion for making the world a safer place. Is anybody on the call in a quite a small business, and maybe could share their perspective on, you know, what it's like in a smaller business, trying to get this sense check of where you are, rather than perhaps the people that have spoken so far have come from kind of slightly bigger organizations where it's been perhaps um, a little bit easier in some senses to do that. I'm just seeing if there's anybody that I want to pick on. If nobody's feeling chatty. In the meantime, what I will say is that the next Safety Roundtable is going to be on the 13th of December. And I'm going to be joined by Peter Forshaw of Waitmans, which is a firm of solicitors. And Peter specialises in health and safety law. And we're going to be running through some of the key health and safety legal issues to consider for 2024. So this will focus predominantly on the UK from the perspective of the legislation, obviously, but some of the trends that we'll be discussing are applicable to those of you around the world as well. And I think it's always interesting to hear the perspective of a lawyer who's only really getting involved when things have gone wrong. And we haven't achieved what we've been trying to achieve on today's call of getting a good benchmark and being in the right place to stop that from happening in the first place. Matthew, you've got your hand up. How are you doing? Oh, you need to unmute. There we go. Oh no, I still can't hear you. Can everyone else hear Matthew, or is it just me? No. It's not just me. It might be that you I can see you've got headphones on. I got a new laptop the other week and I've been having absolute nightmare getting myself connected on Zooms and Teams and all sorts of things, because it just hasn't wanted to play ball with me. Whereas my old laptop, I used to just plug a set of headphones in and it would work straight away without any problems. But yeah, technology sometimes isn't as good as we think it might be. Do you want Are you going to just try your laptop microphone, Matthew, rather than no? No, still not getting you. Who's going to step in and save Matthew so he can figure out what he's working on?
Is it okay if I join in? This is my first session jumping
Yeah,
in
of course. Yeah. How are you?
I'm doing great. So those of y'all that don't know me, I'm Jose Gonzalez. We're based out of Detroit, Michigan. We do underground construction for underground utilities, anything from gas, electricity, fiber, you name it. With that being said, for the type of work we do, I'd say we're relatively small. We've got about 200 field employees.
Mhm.
Of course, there's firms that are a lot bigger than us. But we do take on a similar workload as bigger companies do. And we've been noticing so the topic for today is how do we evaluate the success, right, of our safety program?
Yeah.
And the very first thing is you got to have something that you can measure and track ongoing. I'm not sure what programs you guys use in the UK. Here we use something called iAuditor. And you
That's
set it up.
that's quite common here.
Depending, of course, those of you guys that have used it, you tailor it to your work needs. And what we've noticed here, is anybody here familiar with the energy wheel or sticky? So the energy wheel, and I don't have an example of it. It's more than anything for hazard recognition. Now, instead of, yes, we still hold monthly safety meetings. We do ongoing training for our employees, but we've shifted the focus from laws, as far as knowing OSHA regulations and state regulations. We've shifted it really to basics of, okay, recognize the hazard, fix the hazard, and if you can't fix it, call us in as the safety department and we'll come up with a solution as a team. Now, ongoing with that, with our site inspections that we track on iAuditor, you get a real big picture because one, through the employee's hazard recognition or lack thereof, and through our inspections or audits, whatever you'd like to call it, piecing them both together, you get a good idea of sense of what the employees know as far as hazard recognition, and that helps you out as far as, okay, where do we need to start training? What focus areas do we need to take into account to really get our guys up to par, not only for working at regulation, but at the end of the day, just working safe at its most basic level. Then with iAuditor, you discover trends, whether it's PPE, skipping work steps, taking shortcuts. I would say the biggest challenge overall, I think we have a very good system in place. I would say the biggest challenge overall is getting buy-in from management, from the employees' actual managers. One thing I've been trying to do different, and I'm sure some of you guys have done it in the past, is when I have an issue, instead of me coming up with a solution, which I know is right, which I know is 100% correct per OSHA, I'll still get the managers or the employees in so that they can be part of the solution. And at the end of the day, we're still going to do the same solution I already know is the one we're going to go with, but they end up feeling like they're included in the plan, in the decision going forward. And that really goes a long way as far as compliance in the future if we include them in these talks as far as how to move forward once we do find an issue.
Yeah. And then they can also help you, I guess, then to benchmark if it's going well, because you've got that buy-in from them, a bit like Naomi was talking about, and you can kind of use them to check that you are on track with where you want to be from a safety
Yep, and
perspective as well, I guess.
yes, of course, and that I lost my train of thought here, but at the end of the day, field level employees, they are the masters of their trade. You know, I could know the law, I could memorize all the OSHA standards, but at the end of the day, they're the ones actually working it. You know, and until you put something into practice, it could look great on paper, it could look great here on my computer, but until it's actually being implemented in the field, that's where you really put it to the test of, is it a viable fix or do we need a different solution?
Yeah. No, I love that. Thanks, Jose. And Naomi's asked in the chat if you could put a link to the energy wheel into the chat for everybody to have a look at. So that would be good. There's an interesting comment. I'm going to come to you, Matthew, in a sec. There's an interesting comment about in the chat from Bob actually saying, and I sort of hinted at this earlier. To understand what success looks like, we kind of have to ask what's the function of the professional. What actually are we trying to achieve? Because unless we know what goal we're aspiring towards, how do we know what success looks like? And I think uh, it was interesting to see Stuart Hughes, who's just taken over as president of IOSH, talking about the what word did he use? The plague, I think, of accidents and trying to get into this kind of preventative mindset and almost a bit of a back to basics perspective of stopping incidents from happening. And that's obviously one perspective, but there are others as well. We will get, I'm sure, Stuart on either to a roundtable or to one of the podcasts. Traditionally, we've always done a podcast with the new IOSH presidents. So I might chat to Stuart and see whether he wants to come on and do one of these, and we could maybe do a bit of Q&A with him as well, or if he'd rather just do a podcast. But keep your eyes peeled for that in early 24. Matthew, how are you getting on? Do you think you've got the mic working now?
Possibly.
There we go.
Turns out the browser's interfering with everything that I want to do.
No worries.
Typical. No, it's one of those things trying to work out whether things are going right or not when you're in a company that's like sub 30 employees. Your accident book's got maybe 5 accidents in it. It's really hard to gauge how you're actually progressing and getting on. I mean, a lot of the staff here, thankfully, are quite willing and open to the health and safety, but it's just trying to gauge on whether, you know, the documentation, the procedures and everything such, like, it seems really difficult to gauge whether you're actually doing it correctly.
Mm.
And then, of course, because if you can't gauge whether you're doing it correctly, it sort of then stifles how you're working. It tends to be like a catch-22 and really complicated.
Yeah.
So,
no, definitely. Do you want to own up to being the inspiration for this?
yes, I can do, Christian. Yes, it's my fault, everybody.
No, I don't think anybody would be complaining. I think everybody's pleased. I think it's been a good engaging topic. Have you found it useful to have a few ideas to maybe think about?
I have, yeah. The input from Naomi was great. I think I'll have a look at doing some of those and some of the others. It's just that when it comes to gauging the successfulness of health and safety, everybody wants to base it on figures and metrics, and when you don't have them, it's really hard to even do anything.
Yeah.
So
But then you should always remember lies, damn lies, and statistics. And you can always, you for a smaller business where, as you say, the headline metrics are going to be very low, and therefore doing a trend analysis is very, very difficult. If you're Bob and you've got 18,000 people, then trends analysis is really valuable. But if you've got 30 people, it's almost worthless to the extent that one incident is going to put you up by 300% or whatever. It doesn't really make sense. But what you could do is taking some inspiration from what some of the things we've talked about, including Naomi, as you say, is do some of this qualitative stuff, but try to benchmark that in some way. So you might have um, a sentiment score or I don't know, keyword score or something. There's different ways you can bring in a bit of data, which will give you something to track in a quantitative way, but without having to have all those input statistics because you won't get those, I guess.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's something I'm gonna have to try and dig into, I think, and try and find some way, whether it be via, like you say, accumulating data from, say, a survey or something along those lines, and then try and use that for it and add a quantity to it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully that's been helpful anyway, Matthew. Thanks very much for
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thank you for taking it up, Christian.
No worries, no worries.
Matthew, if I may ask, what kind of work does your firm do?
We are a textiles machinery manufacturer as a whole, but we're the research and development side of the business. So it
Okay,
kind
now
of.
you mentioned you have like about 30 employees. How spread out is it? Like, is it viable to see most of them in one day?
Oh yes, yeah, we're in one smallish building with a large test area. So we have small
Okay.
offices.
Something I used to do in the past, because I used to work for a lot smaller company about 5 years back, was instead of focusing, for example, on the whole crew, I'm not sure how you guys have it structured, but I do individual person observations. And I mean, at the time we had, I think, 17, 18 people. And I would make it a point to do one on all of them every single day. And you could break it into small categories, PPE, and then you could break that down, hearing protection, um, safety-toed footwear, and so on. And it would be kind of broad at the beginning, but after a month or two, you'd start, you can plug it into Excel or whatnot, and you get a pie graph or a chart or something with these broad categories or processes. Not it doesn't have to be just PPE, just broad topics, and then you could kind of start gauging what direction to go forward first. Of course, picking the most dangerous or the most high risk category to tackle first. And of course, like I said, it would be very broad at first, but that'll give you a nice headway of where to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. That's a great idea. I'll look into that. Thank you very much.
Nice one. Thanks, Jose. Claire, so firstly, Claire, I apologise for you were sitting waiting for ages to join, and I hadn't noticed, so I do apologise for that.
No worries. You were busy mid-call and I was late, so that's my fault. Yeah, actually, Matthew, I was going to come in where the other chap just come in. When I used to look after the small side of the business, there was only probably about 250 altogether staff-wise. So it's, compared to everything else, it was actually quite small. One of the things I used to find really useful to get some good data was that sense check with your staff. So very similar as in going out, speaking to them, are they wearing the correct equipment? Do they understand, our safety policy if we have one? Those kind of little bits of data, you can then build that into a bigger picture. And that actually gives you a really good kind of broad overview of your safety culture. So you don't have to have all these high-tech figures with pie charts and waterfall charts and gosh knows what, all these things that, the really big companies have. You can actually do really basic stuff that gives you some really good data and some good insights into how your culture is at that point in time. And then that gives you a really good idea of, okay, well, they don't quite understand risk assessment, so let's do a little bit about risk assessment with them, or they don't quite understand why they need to wear their safety goggles. They don't quite understand perhaps how to, why we've introduced something like, I don't know, when COVID was a big one, when we introduced all the COVID legislation, a lot of the staff didn't really understand why we were doing this, because it was this invisible creature that, we couldn't see, yet people were getting poorly, but we were okay, so why are we worrying? So I had to do a real huge piece of work around why we put COVID in, why we put the COVID measures in place. It wasn't just a government initiative. It's about keeping people safe. It's about keeping you safe, your family safe, your friends. So sometimes that little bits of data that you can gather by going out and speaking to people, doing those individual inspections, making sure they are wearing the right PPE, making sure they understand your policies, your processes, your procedures, making sure they follow the procedure. Do you watch someone and actually you think to yourself, actually, do you know what? You're really, really good up until this point, and then actually you clearly lost your way here, but you fumble along anyway. And you still get the good product at the end, but it's not quite the procedure that we're looking for. It's those sorts of things that you can start to pick up on then and build a bigger picture. So yeah, don't be put off by, loads of huge charts and stuff. I've come from very small stuff to now I'm in a massive, massive kind of company. And trust me, it's not much better in a massive company. The small stuff is easier. So there's less people to worry about, and you quite often find that you can really enact some really good change in a small setting. In a big setting where it's a massive beast, there's a huge organization to turn. You're like turning around a cruise liner. It takes hours. Days, months, years. It does, that you can do it really, really small and quickly in a very small company.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. I agree with that. Thank you very much, Claire, for that and for giving...
No worries. That's great. No worries.
Yeah. Naomi, did you want to come back in on something?
I did. So sorry I didn't bring this up before. I thought about it as we were talking more. I was in a webinar on Tuesday with, she's an Australian safety specialist, Georgina Poole. I highly, highly recommend her podcast, Leading Safely, if you ever want to check something out on Spotify. But the way she deals with smaller teams, and I'm actually going to start implementing in my own business, is a key exercise she does with smaller groups and companies. And what it is her pulse check. She gives everyone a piece of paper and gets them to write down the answer to one question. And the question is, when is the next safety incident going to happen and what will it be? And that's what she uses to measure within smaller teams on how to do it.
I've listened to that. It's really good. I've listened to it. It's amazing. Everybody should watch it. It's fantastic. Yeah.
No, go for it. But yeah, so the question is, when is the next safety incident going to happen and what will it be? And when you get people to anonymously write that down, you're more likely going to get a real answer because they know no one's getting pinned for anything because it's anonymous.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Although less of the plugging other people's podcasts and webinars. Come on. No, I'm only joking.
Sorry.
I'm gonna have a look at that. I'm going from here to a meeting in town, and I'm gonna get onto Spotify or Apple and have a listen.
Well, I actually found you through her, so kudos
Oh,
to
well, there
her.
you go. There you go. Perfect. So,
Could you please write it down in chat once again, the Spotify link? Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
good stuff. Carl, I'm going to come to you, and then we're almost up for our hour. So finish us off with a bang, Carl.
Yeah, no, it was just something actually that you mentioned, Christian, just at the start, and I was thinking of Matthew's issue there, and what you mentioned was measure the inputs, not the outputs. So you were talking about, how many accidents we've had, how many near misses we've had. If you're in a smaller company with not so many workforce, or you haven't had many, that may be a positive. So measure your inputs. What are you doing that's working?
Yeah.
One of my old directors used to have a word. How do we measure a safe day? And is it no accidents, or is it the barriers of control have worked well, not to have accidents? So it's maybe just something, just a final thought, really, I guess, for Matthew's issue there. That measure the inputs is something I'm going to look at, and I've worked in, I've worked with companies at 26,000 employees and company working in smaller companies. So I've been between really, but that's the first time I've really heard that inputs, not the outputs. So it's something I'll look at. It's maybe something that will help Matthew. If you're not having many accidents, look at what you're doing well or what you've implemented. Mitigation controls, etc.
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely what I advise people to do when it comes to slip accidents, because I think, like I shared at the start, with the data is very thinly spread, so it's quite easy to think, yeah, we're doing okay. But actually, that piece of paper test would be interesting, wouldn't it? If you took that into a supermarket, let's say, and you asked the staff that piece of paper question, they'd probably say that the most likely thing is someone's going to slip over because they're probably seeing it all the time. And I think with these sorts of areas where overall it's high volume but lower perceived risk, I think that's where trying to think about the leading indicators is particularly important. So the slip, strips, falls, the manual handling, things like that, because it is very thinly spread, and so you can kind of sometimes be lured into this false sense of security that we're not having any issues, so therefore we must be doing it really well. And it's always worth just taking that step back and saying to yourself, could we be doing more? If the data from similar organizations is showing that this is a potential risk for us in our sector, can we just double check that actually it's because we're doing a great job, or is it just that we've been a bit lucky, or just that we're on the right side of the data? Vishwas, go on, come on in, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Yes, thank you very much for providing the opportunity. This is my first meeting to attend the safety round. My point is related to we know that in safety cultures, leadership play a very important role, and that's what we talk about all time. So now in my previous company, we have also implemented one of the things like safety share, like the good safety thing. Whenever any meeting started at all levels, then we start first with the safety shares, and then we start our continuous meeting agenda. So all the peoples will continuously reminding that the safety is our priority, and again value that should be maintained. So that's why we started for all programs in that way.
Good stuff. Yeah, I think that's definitely a good tip. That's very actionable, and we can all go away and implement. So, so thank you very much for that, and thanks everybody for joining. It's been a great discussion today. I enjoyed this one. Lots of suggestions in the chat of different topics springing off of this. So I'll have a good look at that, and look forward to catching up with you in a couple of weeks on another safety roundtable, and then obviously going forward into 2024 as well. Do take the safety champion assessment that I mentioned. If you are on LinkedIn, come and join the Safety and Risk Success LinkedIn group as well, and we can carry on the discussion there. So thanks very much, everybody. Enjoyed it, and hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.